At 65 years old, he had nothing, no job, no savings, no plan, just a $105 Social Security check and a recipe he believed in. He knocked on over 1,000 doors, and door after door he heard the same word, no. This is the story of how a broke retired cook became one of the most recognized faces on earth, and why it should change how you think about too late. His name was Harland Sanders. Long before anyone called him Colonel, his life was a string of jobs that never quite worked out. He was a farmhand, a streetcar conductor, an army mule tender, an insurance salesman who got fired, a gas station operator during the Depression, wiped out by a fire before he was even 30. By the time most people are settling into a stable career, Sanders had already failed at nearly a dozen of them. But somewhere in a small roadside gas station in Corbin, Kentucky, he started cooking chicken for hungry travelers passing through. People began stopping not for the gas, but for the food. It wasn't a business plan, it was survival. And it planted a seed that would take 30 more years to grow. Over the next 2 decades, Sanders refined his recipe, 11 herbs and spices, and a pressure cooking method that made the chicken faster and better than anything nearby. He built a modest restaurant. It did well enough. He even earned the honorary title Kentucky Colonel for his contribution to the state's cuisine. Then in the 1950s, a new interstate highway was built. It routed traffic away from his restaurant entirely. Almost overnight, his customers disappeared. He was forced to sell everything at auction. After decades of work, Harland Sanders was 65 years old and broke. Most people at that point would have called it a life. He called it a starting line. With his first Social Security check, just $105, Sanders made a decision most people would call reckless. He believed his chicken recipe was good enough to build a business on it. So he packed his car and started driving from restaurant to restaurant, offering to share his recipe in exchange for a small royalty on every piece sold. He cooked for owners in their own kitchens, right there on the spot, so they could taste it themselves. The response, over and over, was rejection. Some accounts say he heard no more than 1,000 times before a restaurant in Salt Lake City finally said yes. Picture that for a moment. A man in his mid-60s sleeping in his car some nights, cooking chicken in strangers' kitchens, hearing no again and again, and still knocking on the next door the following morning. Not because he was certain of success, but because he refused to let rejection be the final word. That single yes became 2, then a dozen, then hundreds. By the mid-1960s, Kentucky Fried Chicken had grown into one of the fastest-growing restaurant chains in America, with the Colonel's face and recipe recognized across the country. He eventually sold the company for $2 million, an extraordinary sum for a man who, just a few years earlier, had been driving highways with nothing but a pressure cooker and a recipe card in his passenger seat. Today, that same white suit and bow tie are recognized in more countries than almost any other brand symbol on earth. It didn't start with funding or connections or a perfect plan. It started with a man who refused to stop at no. It's easy to believe that if something hasn't worked out by a certain age, it never will, that the window has closed, that you're simply too late. Harland Sanders was 65, broke, and rejected over 1,000 times, and he still became one of the most recognized entrepreneurs in modern history. Your timeline is not a verdict, it's just where you are right now. So if you're carrying a recipe of your own, an idea, a skill, a dream you've shelved because it didn't work the first or the 100th time, maybe the door you need is simply the next one. It's never too late to start.